Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen and enjoy my stories every day. Kathy walked through the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. In her hands, she held a huge bouquet of red roses, their scent immediately filling the room. It was the kind of gesture that should have felt warm, romantic, even comforting after a long day. But something felt off. "For you, my love," she whispered, leaning in to kiss me on the cheek. Her lips barely brushed my skin before she stepped back, her eyes darting away, almost as if she were hiding something. I stared at the roses for a moment, their vibrant color a stark contrast to the dullness I had started to feel in our relationship lately. They were beautiful, each bud tightly packed and fresh, except for one. One rose near the center of the bouquet looked different. Its petals were slightly wrinkled, almost crushed. A small pang of suspicion tugged at me, though I tried to push it aside. Maybe it had gotten damaged on her way home. It was nothing. Still, my fingers itched, and before I could stop myself, I reached into the bouquet, carefully pulling the damaged rose from the arrangement. Something caught my eye as I turned the rose in my hand. Tucked between its petals, barely visible, was a tiny piece of paper, held in place with a pin. My heart skipped a beat. Why would there be a note hidden inside the roses? "Kathy?" I asked, my voice tight as I tried to keep my suspicion in check. "Who gave you these?" "Oh, just a delivery guy," she said, too quickly, her voice a little too casual. "A surprise from work." My mind raced. Work? No one from her office had ever done something like this before. I hesitated for a second, then slowly unwrapped the piece of paper. The tiny note had only a few words, hastily written, but they hit me like a punch to the gut. "Love you, meet me at the fountain at 6. No name. No details. Just those cold, unmistakable words. I knew that handwriting. It wasn't Kathy's. It wasn't even an anonymous lover from the shadows. It was someone close, too close. My stomach twisted as recognition flooded through me. It was my colleague's handwriting. Ben. I stood there, frozen, the note trembling in my hands. Ben. He and I had shared drinks after work, laughed over stupid office jokes, shared project deadlines and frustrations. How could he? And worse, how could she? Kathy was busy in the kitchen now, her back turned to me. She acted as if nothing had happened, as if there wasn't a time bomb ticking in the middle of our living room. My hands clenched into fists, the note crumpling as my pulse pounded in my ears. My world felt like it was tilting on its axis, threatening to spin out of control. "Who sent these flowers, Kathy?" My voice was sharper now, demanding. "I told you," she replied without turning around. "Just someone at work being nice. Don't lie to me." I stepped closer, the note in my hand. "Why is there a note in this rose? And why does it say to meet you at the fountain at 6? She froze. I saw her stiffen, her hand gripping the edge of the counter. Slowly, she turned to face me, her eyes wide, a flicker of panic flashing behind them. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her voice wavered, betraying her. I held up the note, shaking it in front of her. "This is Ben's handwriting, Kathy. My colleague. How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me?" Her eyes darted to the note and back to me, her lips parting as if she was trying to come up with an explanation, but none came. The silence between us was suffocating, the truth hanging in the air like poison. I could see the guilt etched on her face, and with every passing second, the betrayal felt sharper, deeper, cutting me in ways I never thought possible. "You don't understand," she began, stepping toward me, her voice soft, almost pleading. "I understand perfectly," I interrupted, my voice shaking with rage. "You've been cheating on me. With Ben, of all people. The one person I never would have suspected. How could you do this, Kathy? After everything?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no empathy, just cold, hard anger boiling inside me. Every memory we shared felt tainted now, stained by her betrayal. I had trusted her, and she had thrown it all away for what? A fling with someone I worked with? "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But sorry wasn't going to fix this. Sorry didn't undo the lies, the sneaking around, the destruction she had caused. I stepped back, shaking my head, my thoughts racing. There was no fixing this. There was no going back to the way things were. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it, either. She had broken my trust, shattered everything I believed in, and now, I was going to break her life just as ruthlessly as she had broken mine. I didn't say another word. I just walked out, slamming the door behind me. My mind was already working, already plotting my revenge. Kathy had no idea what was coming, but she would soon. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The plan was already forming in my mind. Divorce? That was a given. But that wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel what I was feeling. The pain, the humiliation. She thought she could sneak around behind my back, but I was about to show her just how wrong she was. This was only the beginning. The door slammed behind me, the echo of it ringing in my ears as I marched down the street. My head spun with disbelief, anger, and, if I was honest with myself, pain. How had I missed this? How long had it been going on? Was she sneaking around with Ben every time she left for work, every time she said she was working late? The cool evening air hit my face as I walked aimlessly, my thoughts a storm of betrayal. But even through the whirlwind of emotions, one thought crystallized: I had to get back at her. Kathy had destroyed everything we had built together. I wasn't just going to sit back and take it. No, I was going to make her pay. And Ben, too. They both thought they could pull this off without me knowing. But now that I did, I would turn their world upside down. I stopped walking when I reached the small park near our house. My eyes darted to the old stone fountain in the middle of the park. It was nearly 6. The note said to meet here at 6. Would they actually be so stupid as to show up? I lingered near the fountain, crouching behind a tall hedge, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. If Kathy showed up here, if I saw her with Ben, there would be no more doubts, no more questions. Minutes passed like hours. I checked my watch again. 6:03 p.m. Maybe they had changed their plans. Maybe they had sensed something was wrong. Or maybe. Footsteps. I held my breath, pressing myself closer to the hedge, and watched as Kathy appeared on the path, walking towards the fountain. She was looking around nervously, her arms wrapped around herself as if she knew this was wrong. But she came anyway. That was all I needed to see. She checked her phone, pacing in small circles near the fountain. Where was Ben? Was he running late? Damn it, I muttered under my breath, my anger bubbling up again. She didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She looked worried, yes, but not because she had betrayed me, because she was waiting for him. I considered confronting her right there, but a better idea started to take root in my mind. I wanted more than just a confrontation. I wanted them to suffer. Suddenly, I heard another set of footsteps. Ben appeared from the opposite side of the park, a casual grin on his face as if he were meeting a friend. He didn't even care. There wasn't a shred of guilt in his eyes as he approached my wife. The sight of them together made my blood boil. Sorry I'm late, Ben said, giving Kathy a quick kiss on the cheek. Got held up at work. It's fine, she replied, though her voice sounded strained. She was still looking around, like she knew someone could be watching. Like she knew I could be watching. And I was. I took out my phone, capturing their little moment from the shadows. If they wanted to destroy my life, I would make sure their lives burned first. I hit record as they sat down on the fountain's edge, talking quietly, Kathy laughing at something Ben said. I had no idea what they were talking about, nor did I care. All that mattered was the evidence. Minutes passed as I filmed them, my heart hammering in my chest. I wanted to burst out from behind the hedge and scream at them, tell them I knew everything, but I held back. This would be more than just a confrontation. This would be calculated, cold, and final. When they finally stood up, Kathy gave Ben a quick hug before walking back the way she had come. Ben lingered for a moment, pulling out his phone and texting someone, probably her. They were playing a game, and they thought they were winning. But I was about to change the rules. Once they had both left the park, I stood up, my mind racing. I had what I needed. The video was just the beginning. I wasn't going to confront them today, not yet. The plan forming in my mind was so much better. They wouldn't see it coming. Later that night, I returned home, my body tense with adrenaline. Kathy was already inside, pretending like nothing had happened. She sat on the couch, flipping through channels absent-mindedly, as if she hadn't just spent the evening with another man. I couldn't even look at her without feeling disgust. How was your evening? I asked, my voice betraying none of the rage simmering inside me. Oh, just boring, she replied without turning to face me. I went for a walk after work, needed to clear my head. I clenched my jaw. The lies were just flowing out of her so easily now, as if they were second nature. I see, I said, keeping my tone casual. Maybe tomorrow we should have dinner together. Just the two of us. She turned then, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. Tomorrow? Yeah. We haven't had a real date night in a while. I thought it would be nice. She hesitated, looking away for a moment before forcing a smile. Sure. That sounds nice. I watched her carefully, noting the tension in her body. She was hiding something, but I already knew what it was. I already knew where she would be tomorrow night, and it wouldn't be with me. The next day, I spent hours preparing. This wasn't just about catching her in the act again. This was about ending it on my terms, with everything laid out for her to see. I copied the video from the park onto a USB drive, printed out screenshots of the texts she had exchanged with Ben, and even wrote out a letter detailing exactly how I had discovered their affair. I wanted her to understand the depth of her betrayal, and I wanted her to know just how thoroughly I had unraveled her lies. By the time evening rolled around, I had everything in place. The dinner reservation was set, and I knew Kathy would be heading to meet Ben. But tonight, I would be one step ahead of her. Before she left, I gave her a kiss on the cheek, just as she had kissed me the night before. Enjoy your evening, I said softly, watching as she fidgeted under my gaze. You too, she replied, grabbing her purse and heading out the door. I knew exactly where she was going. But what she didn't know was that when she came back, her life as she knew it would be over. The door clicked shut, and I sat down, my mind calm for the first time in days. This was just the beginning. Tonight, I would make sure Kathy and Ben's betrayal became their undoing. And when it was all over, I would be free of her, once and for all. The evening was calm, the quiet kind that settles in before a storm. I sat at the dining table, staring at the empty chair across from me. Kathy wasn't home yet, though I knew exactly where she was. Every time I thought about her and Ben together, laughing, touching, maybe even kissing in some dark corner of the city, my skin crawled with disgust. The betrayal was one thing, but the audacity to carry on with someone I knew, right under my nose, it burned. But tonight, that was going to change. Tonight, I would take control. I picked up my phone, checking the time. She'd be with him by now, probably sipping wine, her fake laughter filling the air. I could almost hear her rehearsed excuses, preparing for when she would come home. I let out a breath, steeling myself for what was about to happen. I had planted the seeds of my revenge carefully. All day, I'd been working on it. I had called the restaurant earlier, pretending to be Ben, and cancelled their reservation. That left them with no romantic dinner plans. No cozy little corner to hide in. I had made sure of that. In place of their reservation, I had booked a room at a nearby hotel in Kathy's name. It was an easy trap, one that played into their desperation to be alone. The plan was simple: she'd show up, thinking she was getting away with her affair, but I'd be there waiting, ready to confront her with the cold truth. My phone buzzed. A message from Kathy. "Hey, running a bit late, dinner's off. Maybe tomorrow?" Of course. It was exactly what I expected her to say. I replied, keeping it simple. "No problem. See you later." I tossed my phone onto the table, feeling the adrenaline course through me. She had no idea. This was going to be perfect. I parked my car outside the hotel, not far from the entrance. From the shadows, I could see the lobby, could make out the people coming and going. My heart was racing, my pulse hammering in my chest. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard, 8:50 p.m. They would be here any minute. Then I saw them. Kathy walked in first, looking around cautiously, her eyes darting like a guilty teenager sneaking out past curfew. Ben followed close behind, his hand resting casually on her back, guiding her forward. They were smiling, chatting quietly, as if they didn't have a care in the world. I felt my fists clench at my sides. As they walked past the front desk and toward the elevators, I grabbed my phone and began recording again. Every step they took felt like a nail in the coffin of our marriage. But I wasn't sad. I was furious. I got out of the car and walked toward the hotel. The automatic doors slid open silently, and I slipped inside, keeping a safe distance from them. Kathy didn't even glance back, too focused on whatever ridiculous fantasy they thought they were living. But I was done with fantasies. I was about to give them both a brutal dose of reality. I watched as they entered the elevator, laughing softly as the doors closed. I waited a few seconds, then followed, pressing the button for the next available elevator. My stomach twisted with a mix of anticipation and anger. When the doors opened on the top floor, I stepped out into the empty hallway. It was quiet, too quiet. My shoes barely made a sound on the plush carpet as I walked down the corridor. My heart raced, each step bringing me closer to the room number I had memorized. Room 1405. The room where my wife and my so-called friend were about to fall into my trap. As I neared the door, I slowed down, listening. I could hear muffled voices inside, Kathy's laughter, soft, intimate. My blood boiled. The betrayal was still fresh, still raw, but now it was time for them to face the consequences. I knocked on the door, sharp and deliberate. There was silence on the other side, followed by hurried whispers and footsteps. I could imagine the panic setting in. Maybe they thought it was room service. Maybe they thought they had more time. The door creaked open, just a crack, and Ben's face appeared, his smile quickly fading into confusion. "Dan," he stammered, his voice laced with shock. "What are you?" Before he could finish, I shoved the door open, forcing my way inside. Kathy stood by the bed, frozen, her face draining of color as she saw me. She didn't say a word, she didn't need to. The guilt was written all over her face. I shut the door behind me, locking it with a sharp click. Well, I said, my voice cold and steady. "Is this how you two spend your evenings?" "Dan, I can explain," Kathy started, but I cut her off. "Explain." I laughed bitterly, stepping closer. "You've been cheating on me, Kathy. With him." I jabbed a finger in Ben's direction. "My colleague, my friend." Ben raised his hands, backing up slowly. "Look, Dan, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I sneered. "Because it looks pretty clear to me." You've been screwing my wife behind my back. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Kathy's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. I wasn't going to let her tears manipulate me this time. Not after everything she had done. Dan, I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't mean for this to happen. Oh, spare me the excuses, I snapped. You didn't mean for this to happen. What did you think would happen when you started sneaking around with Ben? Did you think I'd just never notice? Ben opened his mouth to speak, but I turned on him, my rage spilling over. And you, Ben, how long? How long have you been stabbing me in the back? He looked down, ashamed, but said nothing. Exactly what I thought, I growled. Pathetic. I took a deep breath, calming myself just enough to focus on what came next. The room was thick with tension, both of them waiting for me to explode. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a wild outburst. No, I had something far better in mind. I'm done with this marriage, I said, my voice cold. I'm done with you, Kathy. You betrayed me, and now, you're going to pay for it. Kathy's eyes widened, fear creeping in. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling. You'll see, I said, stepping closer, leaning in until my face was inches from hers. I'm going to destroy you, Kathy. Everything you care about, everything you've built, it's all coming down. You thought you could humiliate me? You have no idea what's coming. She flinched, her tears now flowing freely. But I didn't care. I had already made up my mind. Without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving them both standing there, shocked and broken. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As I stepped out into the hallway, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The rage was still there, burning in the pit of my stomach, but now it had direction. Now, I had a plan. Revenge wasn't just about catching them in the act. It was about making them regret ever crossing me. And by the time I was done, they would. I would make sure of it. I spent the next few days preparing in silence. Kathy acted like nothing was wrong, tiptoeing around me, giving me half-hearted apologies and excuses about work. But I didn't confront her again, not yet. I had something much more devastating planned. Revenge was no longer just an idea in my mind, it was a meticulous plan. I'd spent years building a life with Kathy, and now I was going to tear it apart piece by piece, just like she had done to me. Every lie she'd told, every deceitful act, would be avenged. And Ben? He wouldn't walk away from this unscathed either. That evening, while Kathy sat on the couch pretending to be invested in some mindless TV show, I quietly made my final preparations. I'd been gathering evidence, keeping notes, and today was the day I would set it all in motion. They thought they could sneak around, but they had no idea what was coming. I looked over at Kathy, sitting there like she had no care in the world. My heart had hardened to stone. She didn't deserve mercy. She didn't deserve understanding. She deserved everything I was about to give her. Kathy, I called from the kitchen, my voice casual. Yeah. She turned around, her eyes darting to me nervously. Dinner tomorrow with some friends from work, I said, forcing a smile. I thought we could go together. You know, show them we're still the perfect couple. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but it was necessary. She hesitated, her face flickering with uncertainty. Yeah, sure. That sounds nice. Nice. Of course, she thought everything could go back to being nice. She didn't realize that I had invited Ben, too. And his wife. The next evening, Kathy and I arrived at the restaurant. She was dressed in her usual stunning way, all smiles and charm, her deceit hidden under layers of makeup and designer clothes. I led her to our table, where Ben and his wife were already seated. Ben's face turned a shade paler the moment he saw me. He hadn't expected this. Dan, Kathy, hey. Ben forced a grin, his voice tight. His wife, Emma, seemed oblivious to the tension between us. Poor woman had no idea what was going on behind her back. As we settled into our seats, I could feel the anxiety in the air. Kathy shifted uncomfortably beside me, clearly caught off guard by the fact that we were all here together. I let the conversation flow naturally at first, playing the part of the doting husband, while Ben tried to keep things light. But I wasn't here to play games. "So, Ben," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter like a knife. "How's work been?" "Busy, I'm sure." He froze, his fork hovering midair. Yeah. You know, same old stuff." I leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with him. "Funny. You've been spending a lot of time with Kathy lately." I wasn't sure if that was work-related or something else. Kathy's breath hitched beside me, and Ben's face turned to stone. Emma blinked, looking from me to Ben, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean, Dan?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with unease. I smiled coldly, leaning back in my chair. "Oh, you know. I just figured Ben and Kathy had been working on a special project together. All those late nights, those little getaways. Thought maybe you knew about it, too, Emma." Emma's face went pale. She looked at Ben, who couldn't meet her gaze. "Ben, what is he talking about?" Kathy's hand gripped my arm, her voice barely a whisper. "Dan, don't do this." I shrugged her off, standing up and pulling out my phone. I'd been waiting for this moment, and now it was time to drop the bombshell. "I didn't want to believe it at first, Emma," I said, addressing her directly. "But I've got proof." I opened the video of them meeting at the fountain, the one I had taken from the shadows. The video that showed Kathy and Ben laughing, touching, their closeness unmistakable. I hit play and placed the phone on the table. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's face crumpled in disbelief, her eyes darting between the screen and her husband. Ben's hands were shaking, his face drained of all color. Kathy stared at the table, unable to meet anyone's gaze. "You piece of," Emma started, her voice shaking with rage. She stood up, throwing her napkin at Ben. "How long? How long have you been doing this behind my back?" Ben stuttered, trying to speak, but the words wouldn't come. "And you, Kathy," I continued, turning to her, my voice cold. "Did you really think you could keep this secret from me forever? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Tears filled her eyes, but I felt nothing. "Dan, please," I. "Save it," I snapped. "I'm done with your lies. I'm done with you." I turned to Emma. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Emma. But I thought you deserved to know the truth." Emma, still in shock, nodded slowly, her eyes wet with unshed tears. She looked at Ben with pure hatred, and I knew her marriage was as dead as mine. After dinner, Kathy and I rode home in complete silence. She didn't even try to explain herself this time. What could she say? The truth was laid bare for all to see. When we walked through the door, I went straight to the bedroom. I had packed my things earlier in the day, knowing that this was the final chapter. I grabbed my bag and turned to see Kathy standing in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. "Dan," she whispered, her voice broken. "Please, don't leave. We can fix this. I'm so sorry." I looked at her, the woman I had once loved, now just a stranger to me. "It's too late for that, Kathy. You made your choice." I stepped past her, heading for the door. As I reached for the handle, she grabbed my arm, desperation in her voice. "Please. I'll do anything." I shook her off, my voice cold and final. "There's nothing left to say. You're dead to me." With that, I walked out, leaving her standing alone in the doorway. The night air hit me as I stepped outside, the weight of everything falling away from me. I had taken my revenge. I had exposed their betrayal, ripped apart the lies they had woven so carefully. And now, as I walked away from the wreckage of our lives, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Kathy's life, just like mine, was ruined. We were both broken beyond repair. But the difference was, I was free. And she would be left to pick up the pieces of the mess she had created. We would never see each other again. The hatred of betrayal had destroyed everything, and there was no going back.